This week, Spider-Man No Way Home finally hit theaters. This is the biggest movie to be released in 2 full years. So today we're gonna stop and rank all 11 Spider-Man and Venom films from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your ranking of all 11 Spider-Man and Venom films. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list and I would love to see yours. One more thing before we get started, this video is brought to you by NordVPN. If you're watching this video, it's probably pretty safe to say that you love to watch movies and you spend a lot of time on the internet. Since that's the case, you need NordVPN. A VPN secures your data by encrypting it and routing it through a remote server so people can't spy on you. Here's the cool part for movie lovers. If you're unaware, services like Netflix have different movies available in different countries. NordVPN lets you choose where you want to browse the internet from with just a click of a button, so you can access the Netflix library from any country wherever you're at.
Outstanding.
Choose from 5,200 servers in 60 countries, and their servers run super fast thanks to Nord links. That means you can avoid buffering while watching your favorite show. Go to nordvpn.com/Sean Chandler to get a 2-year plan plus 1 additional month with a huge discount. The link is down below in the description. Use coupon code Sean Chandler, and let's get started. In last place, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This is possibly the most frustrating film on this list because when Mark Webb was making a film about relationships, it's pretty great. Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield have great chemistry, and the ultimate demise of Gwen Stacy is probably the most emotionally gut-wrenching sequence in this entire franchise. But the rest of the movie is an overcrowded, tonally inconsistent mess.
Not impressed.
It's well documented that Sony had mandated a bunch of plot points to set up a Sinister Six movie that never happened. It's well documented that there were massive cuts and the movie was reworked in the editing room, including dramatically reducing Felicity Jones's role in the film, as well as cutting Shailene Woodley as MJ out of the film entirely. One of the big reasons for there being so many cuts to the film is that there were simply way too many subplots in this film. Like, the other big problem here is that the villains just weren't good. Rhino was a bad idea executed even worse, where Paul Giamatti's just yelling, "Ha! Spider!" Then Electro has a story arc and the cheese plucked straight out of Batman Forever. Tonally, they don't really fit with each other, and they certainly don't fit with the more dramatic tone of the relationship scenes. Apparently, amazing was not the right word to describe this film. Kicking off our top 10, Spider-Man 3. After the commercial and critical success of Spider-Man 2, the team was on a creative high, and I still think you get glimmers of that in this film, but overall, this feels like a team trying to force themselves to replicate the success that came naturally and organically in the past. Sam Raimi has openly stated that he didn't want to include Venom and he didn't understand the character, and likewise, behind the scenes, they were just trying to top the scope and size of the first film. So there's more villains, there's more relationship trouble, there's more personal connections to the villains, but more doesn't always mean better.
So I made a decision and it was wrong. It was a bad call, Ripley.
But when there's more of everything, the movie starts competing with itself for screen time, in which case all of the main plot lines as well as the many subplots are all underdeveloped. And of course, the film features some sequences so bizarre and ridiculous that another film on this list felt comfortable making fun of them.
And I did this. We don't really talk about this.
All that said, I still think it has some of the magic. For all of its missteps, I think it gets the central characters right at the moments that matter most. And so when you get to the finale, it feels like they've brought Harry on a complete journey and arc with a satisfying conclusion. So I still do get a good bit of enjoyment out of this film. Now, I wouldn't agree with Sam Raimi, who called this film awful, but I would agree that it's easily the weakest of his Spider-Man films. Number 9, 9, Venom. I feel like this is a deeply flawed film that's also strangely endearing. Every single time I watch the movie, I notice more and more things that don't work, that don't make any sense. But at the same time, I also like it a little bit more. I could nitpick this movie to pieces of everything that's wrong with it, but at the end of the day, I think it delivers the fun that the premise promised. Eddie and Venom are a fun bromance.
Rolling down the street like a turd in the wind.
I feel like I could nitpick this movie and all of its problems for an hour, but at the end of the day, it delivers a bunch of fun action and a satisfying bromance in Eddie and Venom. The story and tone are about as messy as Eddie's psychological state. The first 35 minutes feel like they go in the most roundabout way to get Eddie and Venom together, setting up all these plot threads that either don't go anywhere or that you don't care about. And it feels like a lot of this could have been resolved with just a couple of lines of dialogue. But at the same time, I have a lot of fun with this movie. Tom Hardy fully commits to this over-the-top weird performance.
Hey, Eddie.
Likewise, Venom's just a fun character to see in action, and Eddie and Venom are just a great on-screen odd couple that I love to watch together. The movie gets a ton wrong when it comes to the story and the storytelling, but at the end of the day, it did its job. It entertained me. Next up, Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, this is a movie that hasn't aged very well for me. When I first watched it, I thought it was a nice, fun, lighthearted follow-up to Endgame. Likewise, the cast, as always, are charming, and Jake Gyllenhaal is a bunch of fun to get to see him as both the fake hero as well as the hammy, over-the-top villain giving speeches. But it's a movie where the more I think about it, the less it holds together on any type of story level. The basic premise of this film is that Tony Stark left his dangerous, deadly glasses to a high schooler who had been dead for 5 years without any instructions or training.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
It's such a glaring oversight and bad concept that it just taints the entire back half of the movie for me. This is also the 7th MCU film where a villain is motivated by scorn for Tony Stark. Baby, one more time. And that's what makes this movie so frustrating. When it's a lighthearted road trip comedy with Peter Parker in Europe, it's a lot of fun and funny. The Mysterio illusion sequences, fantastic, creative, interesting, and it's also a very rewatchable film. It's easily the MCU film that my kids want to put on the most, but it sacrifices too much credibility to set up its narrative for it to be satisfying for me. Coming in at number 7, Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Now, to me, this movie was a significant improvement over the original simply because it starts with Eddie and Venom together. What worked about the original was that bromance between Eddie and Venom, and this movie doubles and triples down on the fun of that odd couple relationship.
I will let you eat everybody! Promise! I promise! Oh, yeah!
The movie moves at a breakneck pace to a fault. It cuts away any extraneous subplots, trims all the plot lines to the bare minimum, so it is all action, villains, and comedy. But that also means the movie never really slows down. It just always is moving forward, delivering entertainment.
That costume is amazing!
Thank you!
The villain here is Woody Harrelson as Carnage, and Woody Harrelson is just a lot of fun playing absolute lunatics. And while certainly being PG-13 limits how much Carnage can actually deliver on San Francisco, you do get to see a good bit of death, mayhem, and destruction. Likewise, it has a much more fleshed out third act with more action, more heroic moments. This movie has no pretenses of being one of the greatest comic book movies of all time. It knows it is a comic book movie, B-movie, and it delivers B-movie entertainment. Then we have The Amazing Spider-Man. After Sam Raimi's wildly successful trilogy, or at least 2/3 of a wildly successful trilogy, Webb and Sony had the difficult task of trying to figure out how to reboot Spider-Man in a refreshing way. They chose to take things in a more grounded, serious direction and delivered a good movie with 2 great leads, but I think it still struggled to find a way to stand out and justify why Spider-Man's origin needed to be retold just 10 years later.
But your father lived by a philosophy, a principle, really. He believed that if you could do good things for other people, you had a moral obligation to do those things.
To distinguish itself from Raimi's version of the character, it spends a lot of time building intrigue surrounding Peter Parker's parents and what happened to them. And on the one hand, this is an unexplored area in Peter Parker's life, but on the other hand, that's because Aunt May and Uncle Ben were satisfying and fulfilling in and of themselves, so learning about a conspiracy involving Peter's dad eats up a bunch of runtime answering questions I was not asking about him without really delivering any new insights into Peter, just adding one more layer of daddy wounds.
Why would we do that?
But what really makes the movie work isn't all the Spider-Man stuff. It's all the scenes between the characters. The 2 leads have absolutely amazing chemistry with one another. You fully buy into each of them as believable characters. Therefore, you buy into their relationship and how much they matter to one another. So it grounds the film. So when the fantastic things happen with Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy's dad dying, you really feel it because you care about the characters. It's a movie that I enjoy from beginning to end because I care about the characters and there's great performances here. Though as a Spider-Man movie, I think it fails to find a way to really stand out and make a mark. Point of reference, the rest of these movies I think are all top tier Spider-Man movies. They all do something special. Also, the next 3 movies are kind of tied for me. And in fact, I'm recording my commentary right now 2 days before the video goes up and before I've seen Spider-Man No Way Home a second time. And I might change the order around tomorrow when I'm editing, depending on my experience with the film tonight. In 5th place, Spider-Man Homecoming. After the previous 2 franchises had told the origin story, the MCU version decides to just jump right in with him as an established Spider-Man, but the franchise also doubles down on the fact that he's a high schooler, and in doing so, I think gives us the best high schooler version of Peter Parker. Previous 2 franchises featured a high school Peter Parker, but this one really explores an immature child who is a superhero, and it embraces the genre by taking a lot of influence from the John Hughes high school movies of the 80s. Tom Holland perfectly captures this naive child superhero that's fun, charismatic, and doesn't know what he doesn't know, and it's incredibly endearing. And the film also uses Tony Stark in an interesting new way, making him the mentor to this Spider-Man. Likewise, Vulture, I thought was just a great new way to handle a villain inside the MCU that's not trying to blow up the city or conquer the world. He just feels like he's been wronged by the system. He breaks bad. He's the MCU's version of Walter White and heads down this path to the point in time where he has become this great villain. And the twist reveal about him, I think, is actually highly effective in this film.
That's great!
Now, I do think this movie works best as an MCU film or as a high school superhero movie than specifically as a Spider-Man story. And while that doesn't reduce my enjoyment of the movie at all, with the ranking of Spider-Man movies, it might have knocked it back a spot. Also, when I first watched the movie, it bugged me a good bit that in his first movie, he gets this Iron Man technology-based suit, but rewatching the movie, I don't pay much attention to that anymore.
And now, looking back on it, I just remember the good stuff.
The movie is just a blast. Then we have Spider-Man No Way Home. This was a tricky one for me to score because, as my friend Griffin Schiller put it, it's a tale of 2 halves. The second half of this movie is so good and so satisfying that when you leave the theater, you kind of forget that the first half was pretty mediocre. The first half of this movie just chooses this cheap gimmick to set things in motion.
Stop tampering with the spell. Oh my God, Ned, he's my best friend. Oh, my Aunt May should be.
And then it spends the rest of the first half of the film with this pedestrian plot line about trying to capture all of the multiverse villains. I mean, it's enjoyable, there's some nostalgia and it's fun, but it just feels lazy.
Brilliant, but lazy.
But then you move into the second half of the film and it is such a grin-inducing epic adventure. It's the most heartfelt and emotional of the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, and it ends on such a satisfying note. If you haven't seen the movie yet, spoilers are going to begin in 3, 2, 1. You have been warned. As soon as Aunt May dies, it just cranks up the emotion and the stakes. And finally, you feel like choices matter and they have consequences. And of course, that's followed closely by the emergence of the Spider-Men. And when they show up, the writers and director just knew how to deliver every moment that the audience wanted, where you have the fun banter and it pauses to let those moments happen. And then you get the epic battles of them learning to work together, them having fun learning about each other's universes in a way that's just interesting, it's amusing, and it's something unique to this film. And the final resolution felt earned. And that's what makes this movie so tricky. It feels like they were way more interested in the destination than the starting point and the journey to get there.
We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
But that destination, when we arrived, it put a bigger grin on my face than any other movie on this list.
Outstanding.
Real quick, before I give you my top 3, remember to join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of all the Spider-Man and Venom movies. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Also, I have done a ton of Spider-Man content in the past, and I've got more coming over the next few days. I've done individual reviews of every single movie on this list, so if you want my full thoughts, you can check them out in this playlist right up here. I've also done many, many more Spider-Man rankings, and I've got more to come, and you can check those out right up here. In third place, Spider-Man 2. This movie does what all great sequels do. It picks up where the last movie left off. It builds on that foundation and expands upon all the themes, the character arcs that were set up before. But with the origin story out of the way, we're able to dig deeper into this character and really explore the tension in Peter Parker as he struggles to be Peter Parker as well as Spider-Man. And it plays it out in such a fun way, but also a human way. Add to that, you get a great villain in Doc Ock as this fun, nerdy, charismatic doctor who's driven mad by his own technology, and they still give him this great arc of not wanting to die as a monster. And then the movie just has all these great sequences that pay off everything that had been set up in this film as well as the previous film, especially the train sequence where you have a Peter embracing his destiny as Spider-Man and desperately tries to save this train and collapses in the process, and then the city grabs him, stands up to protect him, and they're gonna protect his identity.
It's all right.
We won't tell nobody.
I just think it's a great sequence. Likewise, when you move into the third act and MJ finally sees Spider-Man without the mask, she doesn't need to say anything. Her face communicates all the thoughts going on in her head, everything that she's feeling. It's just directed so well. And a big part of that is because that tension had been built throughout both of these films. And so it's such a satisfying release when you get that moment. All in all, if this wasn't such a competitive set of films, it might be in those top 2 spots, but we have some even better Spider-Man films. Our runner-up, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, one of the most creative, unique, and interesting animated films I have ever seen, where they tried to find a way to animate the film in a way that brings the comic book material to life in a way that you can't really do with a live action film, in which case it takes full advantage of the medium by which it's telling the story. The style is used as a mechanism for the storytelling. It's not just a gimmick, it all integrates for what they're trying to do to create this unique Spider-Man experience, unique animated experience, unique comic book movie experience. Beyond that, Miles Morales is just kind of a breath of fresh air as this fun, innocent little kid that's brought on this fantastic adventure, just gaining powers, meeting all these superheroes, discovering the multiverse. So he's a great lead for the film, but of course we get a bunch of other Spider-Men and women in this film. Each of them gets their own little moment in the spotlight, something quirky and interesting about them. To me, Spider-Noir was the big scene stealer of the bunch.
Is he in black and white?
Where's that wind coming from? We're in a basement.
Wherever I go, the wind follows.
But what elevates this one to the top two spots for me are the fully fleshed out character arcs for Miles Morales and Peter B. Parker. I think Peter B. Parker is just this great character, as he's clearly a superhero that's depressed. He's off. He's fun. He's funny. But he's not self-parody. And because of that, I think he's a better version of what they were trying to do with the big Thorbowski in Endgame. But I think that one went too far, and this balances it just right.
How do I know I'm not gonna mess it up again?
You won't.
Right. Hate to leap the thing.
Therefore, it's not just a great Spider-Man story, it's not just a great comic book movie, it's not just a great animated movie, it's just a great movie. But in first place, Spider-Man 2002. If Spider-Verse is the most creative and interesting film on this list, and the Tom Holland films are the high school MCU-ified version of Spider-Man, this is just a classic version of the Spider-Man character told in a fairly timeless fashion, besides the soundtrack. Now, I love origin stories, and Peter Parker, Spider-Man have one of the great comic book origin stories.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
The other thing that just makes this movie work is how much time we spend with Norman Osborn. He gets a full origin story and character arc, so we can see who he was before he turned into the monster. We understand why he experimented on himself, and then we see the total descent into madness. And so much of that goes back to how efficient the script is of just incorporating Peter Parker, his friendship with Harry Osborn, therefore Norman can just be mixed into all these sequences. It's also important to note just how groundbreaking this film really was when it first came out. This was the first comic book movie of the digital CGI age as we know it. Now, X-Men and Blade kind of laid the foundation, but this was a huge, massive blockbuster, and the first time that they could make a movie where you could have Spider-Man swinging through New York City at incredibly fast speeds and have it be believable. I just think that this one was special. Therefore, it comes in at number 1. Remember, if you're interested in internet security, to check out that link down below to get a discount on NordVPN. If you want more Spider-Man content from me, you can check out my movie reviews right there, my other rankings right down there. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.